Hello, I'm Juliet Mann, and this is the Agenda podcast, CGTN Europe's one-stop shop for smart, in-depth discussion of the issues that really matter in the world today. This week on the agenda, tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. As Donald Trump upsets the world order, we examine the thinking behind his take on trade. He hasn't yet spent 100 days back in the White House, but Donald Trump has already upset the world with his extraordinary approach to trade and tariffs. So where exactly are we headed? And can we expect more of what China has called Trump's economic bullying? With me now are Marco Simoni, Adjunct Professor at the Faculty of Political Science at Rome's Luis University, German economist and President of the EU chapter of the Club of Rome, Karl Falkenberg, Professor Jiandong from the PBC School of Finance at Tsinghua University and Chairman of the China Trade Research Group, and Douglas Barry, Adjunct Professor at George Washington University and author of Smart Rabbits, American Small Business People, Trade Wars and the Future of US-China Relations. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on the agenda to talk trade and tariffs. Marco, let's start with you, because as we speak, while trade is in turmoil, and many are questioning just how Donald Trump came up with his tariff plans. What do you think is the thinking around all of this? After all, he's not an economist.
Well, the quite extraordinary thing is the very fact that you're asking this question, because usually when a leader enacts any policy, he or she will explain us what the thinking is. But everybody seems to believe that whatever Donald Trump is saying to the rest of the world is not the real reason, because it seems actually absurd, because everybody thinks that 90% of economists, or even normal people that are not economists, think that a trade deficit is not necessarily a bad thing, that the US is necessarily going to have a trade deficit with the majority of countries they put tariffs against, because they are very smaller countries. So there's no possible combination of economic factors that will not have America having a trade deficit with many of the small countries that were inserted in the list. So the question of who gains from it, there's a famous Latin proverb, cui prodest, like who is going to win from these tariffs? That's the real question that should be asked. Economically, maybe some financiers that have shorted either American stocks or American Treasury, for example, they probably are making money right now. Or maybe some sectors that expect to be unfettered from this. I don't know, some digital services that are not actually traded as good, but are traded as service. It's really hard to tell, because most people are going to not get economic advantages, including multi-billionaires, including average income people, including the poor. Politically, though, it might be that the president has the sense that his majority will go behind him, and therefore he's going to be stronger at home.
It seems like he wants to rip up the rule book when it comes to global economic rules. Karl, are these tariffs really going to do anything about the US trade deficit with the likes of Europe, with the likes of China?
It depends a lot on the reaction of both the European Union and China and many of the others, Canada, Mexico. I mean, a lot of countries are in the spotlight here to see how we react. Trump has basically ripped up the multilateral trade rule book, and it is to some extent for others now to react. China has reacted. The European Union has announced what it is likely to be. Canada has equally began to withdraw some concessions from the United States. And I think it's in that reaction that in the end the outcome is going to be defined. I think what we see for the moment is turmoil. I think everyone has expected that there will be inflationary pressure on the United States market. I think some of those concerns are now being voiced within the United States itself. But the way in which the other countries react, do we accept that we all play according to Mr. Trump's rule book, or do we stand for what has been negotiated in the last 30 years among all those countries and which is represented by the World Trade Organization? I think that's one of the fundamental questions.
Jiandong, let's talk a little bit about individual countries' responses. I mean, China started off being quite measured. Now the language seems to have really changed and become more pointed. Their response had been very sector-specific, but China insists it won't bend in the face of what it calls economic bullying and will fight to the end. It's now announced this extra 84% on US goods. So where's this going to end?
Well, so you start from a 34%, being the Mr. Trump increased to 50%, being China respond to 50%. I really think this additional 50% it's really unnecessary. It's kind of an emotional response by Mr. Trump. Based on this, we are economists thinking these great countries' trade policy should be rational, should not be emotional. So I really hope these Mr. Trump can go back to reality, because these tariffs eventually will hurt the economy for the both sides, and the Wall Street is really responding right now, and we hope these tariff wars will not go to financial crisis.
Douglas, your recent book, Smart Rabbits, looks at how small American businesses deal with problems in terms of China-US relations. This is going to be catastrophic for many of them, isn't it?
Yes, it is catastrophic. And I will join the Greek chorus here in condemning what's happening now. It's so disruptive. And it's going to be so damaging. These small companies, for example, import intermediate goods from China, and then they finish the product here, and they sell into the U.S. market, but they also sell into other markets as well around the world. So it's these small sort of micro multinationals in the United States that are very important for local tax bases, for employment, and they have told me that they will go out of business with even 10% tariffs on Chinese goods coming into the country. So this is really terrible. And I think that, as Marco indicated, we're looking at a recession here in this country. And we're looking at inflation. So prices are going to go up for people, especially those who are the most vulnerable. And this is going to cause a lot of pain. I'm lucky enough to have some money in the stock market for my retirement, which is looming. I got my statement from the group that manages the money yesterday, and I didn't open it. I threw it in the trash because I knew if I opened it, it would be so upsetting that I probably couldn't appear on the program today. So, the pain is going to be very great. But it may be that the U.S. Consumer needs to feel this pain in order to realize how crazy, how disoriented, how delusional these policies are, and the justifications given for what he's doing don't make sense at the end of the day. They really don't. And so I think we have to hit bottom here. But the worry is that other people will also be taken down with us, and vulnerable economies around the world that depend on the U.S. market, there could be political ramifications. It could create certain instability over time, and we're just now beginning to see the potential damage to the world trading system that these actions are going to create.
So damage, crazy, delusional. Mark, I can see you nodding away there. And so let's bring you back in, because you're a political economist, and I know you touched on this a little bit earlier, but would you say that Trump's tariff plans are economic in terms of their roots, or political, or something else?
I was nodding because I was in total agreement with what Doug was saying earlier. I think that there is no economic case for what he's doing at all, with the exception, as I said, of somebody who may be shorting some stocks or some treasury bonds. So it is a political consequence of 30 years of dispossession of a part of the domestic electorate in the United States. I think that the middle class in the United States has brought this somehow to the world, because the consequence of what happens to the states don't stay there because of how important are the United States of America for the economy. But I also think that we are not in 1960. We're not even in early 2000s. We're in 2025. And China is not what it used to be 25 years ago. And I think that America is very important, but America, take Italy, for example. We export to America a huge amount of goods. 10% of our exports, and we are a very exporting country. 10% is a lot, but it's not like 100% or 50%. I don't know. I don't have the same share for China. China, of course, has a lot of exports to the US, and if 100% tariffs, which is absurd from any viewpoint, there is no sense. Like 100% tariffs is not even worth discussing. If they're going to stay, of course, trade with China would crash. But the first people who are going to hurt from that are the Americans that are importing partial goods or other type of goods to sell it back to the US. Like Apple is going to lose a lot of money. These are the first people that are hurt, because then China will export more to Italy, and we will open up more between each other and export more to Poland or India. There's a lot of exports that can go on without the United States. Like, the weird thing here is that to have a political reaction here, there's one country that is putting tariffs against all the others, while the other countries, they're still okay with each other as they used to be the day before. So this single country is going to feel a lot of pain. And the important thing, I think, for the global business and political community is, not to overreact. Like, keep cool, turn on the other side. Is like a friend that is self-harming. You're not going to self-harm yourself so that the friend, you just tell the friend, please, can you stop that? It's not good for anybody. But still, go with the other friends and do business with the other friends.
It's interesting you say keep cool with what we're seeing, the volatility on financial markets all around the globe. Jiandong, with tariffs for China from the US so high, this is basically a trade embargo, isn't it? How do you see it playing out?
Well, so Mr. Stephen Mann, actually, it's the White House, the economic advisor. He discussed this issue, and from his theory, this manufacturing decline in the U.S. is really because there's a strong dollar, and it's the dollar's position as the world, the reserve currency. So these tariffs will not solve the problems of this strong dollar, will not solve the current, these distorted international monetary systems. So to solve these issues, and Mr. Stephen Mann also suggests should go gradually, let's say increase 2%, but now it is a sharpie. It is tariff earthquakes that would destroy the global value chain. So it takes time for U.S. economy to readjust, and then also you need to leave time for the world to adjust. So this is just emotional from Mr. Trump's side. Well, I really don't understand. I hope the people, Mr. Trump and the U.S. government, and it can go back to rational. Let's sit down, negotiate, try to find a way to solve the problem.
I mean, I wonder if you think that Trump's tariff plans show maybe a misunderstanding of trade deficits and indeed the way that the global economy works. I mean, the confusion is causing mayhem on the markets, isn't it?
The nominal tariff rate is relatively low, and that's thanks to the World Trade Organization, which the United States helped set up. We also have 20 free trade agreements with countries, including Canada and Mexico, and that means that there are no tariffs going either direction. So the issue, and the one that needs to be pursued, but it's lost in all of this rhetoric, is the non-tariff barriers that have hurt U.S. companies and have created situations where it's difficult for U.S. companies sometimes to enter certain markets, and in particular China. And that's what the original trade agreement that Trump signed during his first and insisted on during his first administration was to address some of these problems with market access, which China admits it's been slow to open up. And they've been, President Xi has been saying for the last 10 years, we're opening, we're opening, we're opening. Unfortunately, the opening has taken place at such a small rate that it's allowed some of this acrimony and anger to build up in the United States. So that can be addressed, but it's really the non-tariff barriers, I think, is the big issue at the moment. The other point that's worth saying is the justification that Trump has given is, well, we need more manufacturing in the United States. This will create jobs and make Americans richer. In fact, it won't, because in a report this morning, it said that if Apple was to bring back the iPhone manufacturing to the United States, the average price for an Apple iPhone would be $3,000, wow, which is triple the current rate, which is already very expensive. So having these things done, having them made and assembled in China makes great sense. And in fact, the other problem that no one ever points out, and certainly not Trump, though he should know better, is that the majority of the value of the iPhone is really accrues to U.S. investors, because 60% of the value of the phone is U.S. intellectual property, and only 40% is other places.
Carl, there's something I want to ask you about, because in a phone call between China's Premier Li Qiang and European Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen this week, they stressed the importance of the EU working together with China to set up a mechanism for tracking possible trade diversion. How do you think that might work, and what opportunities do you think the US tariffs might give to improve relations between the EU and China?
An interesting question, but a difficult one to answer. But let me perhaps, in one or two sentences, come back on the overall economics. I don't think that Trump is not knowing what he does or is not rational. His rationality is power. He likes to destabilize countries and see what happens. And then he proudly announces that 50 different heads of government are knocking on his door and begging for a negotiated outcome rather than what he's imposing. So it's really very, very much a very negative, power-driven approach. And the method he's applying is wrong and should be resisted. Now, what he does will have diversion effects. A lot of countries who will find it difficult to still sell in the United States are still producing, and what they produce needs to go to some market. And the big open market in the world economy is the European single market. And so one of the fears that we see is that a fallout of Trump's tariffs is likely to be redirecting other countries' exports to the European market, and that could create serious economic industrial problems for the European economy. And that's why talking to each other is important. And as in the past, we will need to monitor how trade is driven. We should not allow Trump to divide us, but there will be competition for where do our goods that we have produced for the American markets, which is no longer selling there, where do we sell it? And it's going to be very interesting to see how we handle this.
Marco, what do you think? Can the EU and China stand firm together against the United States?
I hope that both the EU and China, as I said before, keep cool and defend their own approach to a peaceful multilateral trade relations. Look, no bloc is exempt, and by bloc I mean China, the US, Europe, is exempt from, trying to get a little advantage here and there in the global trade. Every company that does, this is like business. It's not like we are doing charities, and every businessman will always try to pull the blanket in its own direction. And that's why we invented the WTO, to settle problems that we have. That's why we invented the UN, so we can go there and talk if we have a misunderstanding on something. In fact, the economic organizations globally are the ones who have worked the best so far. And that's the way to solve problems, and we still keep committed to work in that direction. We are reading around news of businesses going bankrupt in the US because there are a lot of items you just cannot make in the US, like coffee, for example. And there are a lot of items that will take years and years to be able to make in the US again. So this is the situation we are facing right now. And every crisis is an opportunity. I don't like this model because I'd rather not have crisis. But of course, Europe and China, Europe and Africa, Europe and the Middle East, Europe and Southeast Asia should work more together and with each other, keeping the multilateral trade system alive and kicking and waiting for the US to come back, because we still think that we can do a lot of business with Americans, and that's why we should not retaliate. That's my position. I wrote it in the newspaper in Italy. We should not put counter tariffs. I think that's a bad idea, because we should still keep as much as possible working with our American counterparts and business people that we've been working with for 80 years. Not stop. They're not the problem. An administration making negative choices for everybody. That's the problem. And, hopefully with democracy, eventually the problem will be solved.
Keeping cool is a nice slogan, but you have a situation where in the World Trade Organization we have all opened up our markets on the basis that these are bound tariffs, that we respect them, they have been negotiated, they're applied. We have production oriented on the basis of those things. Now one country closes the door, and we just look by and we say, okay, no problem, you hurt yourself, but they hurt us.
Yes.
Our car exports, Italian exports into the United States will no longer be possible. And we simply say, oh, that's fine. You take a break from the WTO, but we will continue being there. I don't think that that's the way in which we will solve this problem.
Jiandong, do you think that things can be pulled back from the brink? I mean, in the trade white paper this week, China stressed the importance of talks with the US on mutual respect, on win-win cooperation. And Donald Trump says he's waiting for China's call. Do you think that's still possible?
Yes, I do think it's possible. Look, the China exports to U.S. Most of these parts, it's intermediate, the equipment, intermediate goods, which are, some of them are crucial to U.S. manufacturers. Some the intermediate parts which cannot be substituted from other countries. So right now, these tariffs increase, and if Mr. Trump is still emotional, maybe may increase more, that's virtually stop the trade between these two big countries. That will make U.S. manufacturer at the shock. So that's, I think, this response. I agree, Mr. Trump is emotional, but the U.S. economy is rational. People are rational. People need a normal life. So that's the request for more normal life for the U.S. people will bring these U.S. governments to negotiate with China. So that I think the reality will speak, and it's the slogan in the U.S. Go around for a long time. It's economy. You need look at economy. Economy will speak out loudly.
We're talking a lot here about partnerships, about collaboration, and Douglas, in your book, you do highlight how cooperation matters. How do you think business ties between China and the US should be strengthened rather than pulled further apart, or has that ship sailed?
No, I don't think the ship has sailed. I think that every day there are U.S. business interests that are engaging with China in a variety of ways, and these relationships are important. This is people-to-people diplomacy, where relationships really matter, and they have been developed over a number of years. The other point that's important, and I think Professor brought this out, is the need to continue to have these kinds of associations and conversations, and they occur in a lot of different fora. So those things will continue to happen, and the supply chains that we have now that have created this tremendous efficiency of getting goods from one place to another and creating a plethora of goods that satisfy demand in countries all over the world. These have taken years to develop, and they're really important because they also create a certain amount of not only personal relationships behind the supply chains, but also innovation and entrepreneurship. And to mess with those things without really understanding the value of them, I think is really a serious problem. So, and then why are we conducting trade diplomacy in this very public fora? Why aren't we having meetings at various levels between the different governments, including the U.S. and China? It seems like it's a bullhorn across the Pacific. Instead, we ought to be sitting down with people behind closed doors and ironing some of these things out. So hopefully that will change, and people will start talking to each other again, as they've not been in the past.
Douglas Barry, Marco Simoni, Carl Falkenberg and Jiandong, thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Remember, you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find more agenda content on CGTN Europe's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram and YouTube channels. Until next time, goodbye.
The most interesting questions.
Are there other living beings beyond Earth?
Will man or machine be in charge?
Great question.
Always have more than one answer.
Well, hold on, let me just draw up a list.
And always come from more than one person.
That's where the credibility lies.
The concept of having a machinery which is alive and evolving didn't wait for us.
The end of inequality of incomes and wealth around the world, can you imagine how difficult that is at the moment to achieve?
Every episode, Stephen Cole, Murray Beveridge, and some of the brightest minds out there shed light on the answers to some of the most intriguing questions.
There are two ways of looking at this.
Machines can't really discriminate between civilian and military targets.
The Answers Project.
Maybe we need to just look at this in a bit more detail.
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
The Answers Project, a new podcast from CGTN Europe.